Daddy gets lost. Daddy gets lost. Daddy gets lost. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenge of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that even means. Actually, tonight's not really about the challenge of being a man in modern society. I don't even know where to start tonight because we're going to discuss domestic violence. In the wake of what happened in Brisbane this week with a husband ambushing his wife and killing her and 3 children, that attack followed a decade of emotional and sexual and financial abuse. He checked her social media accounts. He ordered her to wear specific clothes and not wear specific clothes and made offensive comments, including, "Hey, look at your stomach. That's just disgusting." She left him and then he killed her and her children. And a male has killed their partner 8 times already this year. 8 fucking times. Sorry, it's fucking ridiculous and it simply should never happen. The stats are that 1 in 6 women in Australia have experienced physical or sexual violence from a current or previous partner, a cohabitational partner, spouse. Yes, not all men are like this, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is this shit stops. It's important to remember that domestic violence is not, mutual combat or relationship conflict or people having a fight over, a flippant thing in the relationship. Domestic violence is when one person makes a choice to exert power and control over another person. And this is almost always the male. And they rely on a range of tactics to assert control, including physical and sexualized violence, psychological and emotional abuse, financial abuse, and social isolation, amongst other sort of tactics that males use to make females feel bad. Okay, Maddie, this is probably the most serious thing we'll ever discuss on Daddy Eats Last. And when we exchanged messages about this, you mentioned that statistically we would both know people who are being subjected to domestic abuse. And it's not just physical abuse. The problem is, often when there's no physical violence, people miss the signs. And that's what we discussed over text messages, that statistically we both know people who are being subject to domestic abuse.
Yeah, good evening, Kane. As you mentioned, a very delicate subject, but I think it's great that we are talking about this and passing on our discussions to our listeners. Following on from that stat, Kim and I were discussing in the car just about, we're running through some people I get through in our minds, trying to think of, is there anybody we knew that could possibly be in a situation of domestic violence? And it was a bit of a wake-up call, I guess, because we probably didn't even know what to look for or the signs to look for to determine if someone is in a situation like this. So I think tonight, just talking about a few of the signs to look for is a good starting point, I think. One of the biggest stats that hit home for me, I was reading up on, is on average 1 woman a week is murdered by her current or former partner. And reading that was just sort of blew my mind as to how serious and huge this is within our country. And there's things have got to really change.
But people use the term, people have used the term epidemic to describe this. And epidemic is just one of those terms, I think, where people, kind of just throw it around where it kind of means nothing. But 1 woman a week is just, that's fucking mind-boggling that it's even possible that it's that. But the stats are that's what it is. But if we, and as you mentioned, the hard bit is maybe if there's physical abuse, it's more obvious, because you can kind of you can potentially see that sort of stuff. But it's all the other stuff, which, this guy had never, from what I've read, had never actually laid a hand on his wife, but was using all other types of ways to effectively, use his power to, make her feel bad. So I think it's particularly those signs where it's maybe not physical, how you can pick up on any signs that somebody might be being abused in a non-physical capacity is something which would be, if there's anything you can kind of think of which would fit that bill. And we've both done some research on this today. So, I think that's the hard part, though.
It is the hard part, and it's quite tricky to sort of see anything other than, I guess, the remnants of physical violence, like you said, the other types of domestic violence are sort of hidden in a way, I guess, with like social media and things like that, and like social situations and other things. So, look, I guess a few of the things that I took away from of signs were just, I guess people. Well, one example is, I guess, people cancelling last minute for events or on a consistent basis. I guess if they're, if you've invited them to an event and you're talking to them before the event, they're very happy, they're excited to come, and they just keep on cancelling last minute. That could be a result of some issues in the home. That is one way. I guess another way of reluctant to leave their children with their partner is another way. So whilst there not be any physical signs, but if you can pick up on casual conversation with someone, and if they're reluctant to leave their kids with a partner, there could be an issue there as well. Did you have any, mate?
Well, I actually have some examples from real life examples of situations which it's funny. These have only come up in the last sort of maybe 3 or 6 months, and both times these examples came up, I kind of my jaw dropped that this again was even possibly a thing. One of them was my wife gets her hair cut down the street, and I look after the little fella, so she generally gets the haircut her haircut when I'm looking after the little fella. And like we just kind of walking past one day, I think we picked up lunch for her because it was over lunchtime. We're going to drop that in, and he makes little faces in the mirror, like he was doing Grinch face. I think at that point he was going through his Grinch face phase. So he's doing that. We walk in and just hey, he's dropping off some lunch, and then we walk out. And she finishes the haircut. She comes home and then she tells me the story that the hairdresser said to her, "Is everything okay?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, the hairdresser says to her, "Well, your husband came in, like, was he coming in to make sure we didn't cut your hair too short?" My wife's like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And the hairdresser went on to say it's not uncommon for males to come in when their partners have had their hair cut and say, "You cut my wife's hair too short. I don't like her hair short." And he told my wife of an example where the hairdresser has suggested to this woman that she cut her hair short, and he cut it short, and she loved it. She went home. This is mid-afternoon. At 5 o'clock, the husband pulls up with the wife in the car, drags the wife in by the hand into the hairdresser, and just goes and basically abused the hairdresser for cutting his wife's hair too short.
Oh my God, that is awful.
Yeah, it's just. If she told me, I was shocked. I kind of just, and because it was so foreign to me, I kind of probably took it the wrong way. Like I kind of thought, "Are you for real?" Like I can't. Like it was almost amusing, but it's that fucking serious. The only way you could kind of rationalize it was to kind of look at it in a not a funny way, but like "Are you serious?" way. It was just I couldn't believe that that happens.
Wow, and that probably happens more than we assume. I mean, like you said, this is such well, for me anyway, like a sort of a foreign topic, but it's important to discuss, like to try and pick up on these signs. And I mean, that is a dead giveaway that something's happening there.
Yeah. So if you're a guy listening to this podcast and you do that, you're a dickhead. Yeah. If you do anything like that, stop. That's not right. Straight up. And another example which has come out, I was thinking when we were discussing this topic, I know somebody who just probably in the last year broken up with her husband, and from the outside everything was fine. They had a kid, everything's going pretty well, and we find out that that he used to tell her not to wear, don't you wear red lipstick, don't wear leopard print, it draws attention to yourself. I'd cover your cleavage up and those sort of things. So it's the same sort of stuff. That's domestic abuse. Like it's not physical, but you're controlling somebody and using your power, inverted commas, to make someone feel like shit and ruining somebody's self-esteem. And we had no idea, and she's a good friend.
Well, another example of how domestic violence is being used. I think we should maybe also just explain the other forms of domestic violence as well. So it's not just physical or what you said there in terms of controlling, but there are other forms of domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional abuse is a big one, and it's again that's almost invisible. It's those sort of things are where you're being emotionally abusive towards somebody, or you just chip away at somebody's feeling of self-worth and independence. So you basically, constantly, at somebody emotionally, you're just kind of ruining them emotionally, and I think that's probably almost the most common form of abuse, and something which is always silent. And I guess the signs which would, people would become depressed and withdrawn and really self-conscious, I'd imagine. So there'd be some signs to look out for as well.
Also, financial abuse as well. So not giving enough money, to survive, or forcing you to hand over your money, for example, in situations.
Yeah, and that was another way that second example that I had, the one who said, "I don't wear the red lipstick," he also used to just give her an allowance of $20 or something for her. Like, he controlled all, because he was the main money winner, and he would give her a set amount of money a week to spend, which is just, it's 2020. It was 2019 or 18 at the time. It's not like the 1920s. But that was something which also came up in that example.
So I think we'll get these links to some websites up on the Daddy Eat Last website. But I noticed after the event that happened in Queensland, there was a politician had jumped on the Twitter sphere, having a go at Scott Morrison, saying, "What are you going to do about this?" Now, I think that we, as parents, and especially fathers, both of us of sons, have a massive responsibility to educate our boys on the rights and wrong of treating, their fellow man, but also, especially with women, and how to treat them from a young age. So I think it really needs to start at grassroots. Like, whilst, the government can put things in place, I really think there's an onus on us as parents and society as well to call it out if we see it, and to educate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some really good examples last week in the media. St. Kevin's was a good example. They're in the media. I don't know if they made its way up there because they're a Melbourne school, but the ABC did a Four Corners report on them. And there was obviously that footage last year, which came out of the boys chanting, I guess, just stupid teenage boys, sort of, inappropriate stuff on trains and trams. But obviously that has never been pulled up by somebody, be it a teacher, be it a parent. It's never been pulled up by somebody, because the moment somebody pulls you up and says you can't do that, then you have a think about whether you should be doing those sort of things. So be it a parent, be it somebody who sees this sort of thing happening, it's also the hardest thing to do, is to kind of be the one who stands up and says, listen, you shouldn't do that. But it's probably the most important thing you can do as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think by the time they're at that age, we need to start a lot younger.
Yeah, I think it's never too late to start, but if you can set those good examples at the very beginning, it certainly is a lot easier to teach than to change.
Mm.
It's a really difficult topic, because it's up until, and it's been in the media, and it's been bubbling away, and it's seemingly becoming more prevalent. And you mentioning before about what the government can do. Part of that financial abuse part is that the sort of gender equality in the workplace and equal pay, and the fact that women are the ones who still are the ones who are the primary caregiver if you do have a child and you're out of the workforce. I think if there's any way that women can put aside even if they can squirrel away, or they can find somewhere where they can even say there's $1,000 there. If I do need to be able to exit a relationship, I have $1,000. That's enough for me to go and stay at a shitty hotel or a motel for a week and get out and buy food. It could be something as small as just squirreling away where you can to get $1,000. And Scott Pape, the barefoot investor, talks about Mojo Blow and his buckets and stuff like that, and he's really big on financial counselling, especially for single women or women who are single mothers or out of fractured relationships. But I think if you're a woman, if you can somehow start squirreling away some cash, so if this ever comes up, you have something to escape financially, it might make all the difference.
I think that's a wise idea, because some of the stats you do and the reasons why women stay in these relationships as well is that's one of the factors, is because they don't believe that if they were to leave that they'd be able to support themselves. So I think having that little nest egg, I guess you could probably call it, to fall back on is a great idea, because that'd allow them, I guess, to jump one hurdle that is stopping them from perhaps moving on.
Yeah.
Or moving away from the danger they're in potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ones you touched on earlier was, people maybe no-showing a series of appointments you make with people. I guess that kind of links back to social abuse as well, which is, essentially when someone kind of insults you in front of other people or keeps you isolated from your family or friends. How many times do you see that when somebody goes into a relationship and then they just kind of withdraw from their friendship group or from seeing their family?
Yeah, exactly. And we're not just talking, a guy gets a new girlfriend and he stops seeing them, but it's more than when the norm just completely flips to what it once was. That's when there's something potentially going on.
Yeah, and the other hard bit is if you do see the signs, like, how do you bring that up? Like, if you think that somebody's in a relationship which is hurting them, be it physical, be it emotional, how do you actually bring that up? Do you essentially risking the friendship if nothing's up and you say something? You're potentially risking your friendship with a person by saying, "Oh, listen, is everything okay at home?" And I think it's a risk worth taking. Like, I'd be happy to risk a friendship and maybe wreck a friendship, but on the flip side, you might save somebody's life.
Yeah, that's something you've really got to weigh up when you do it. But I think you just need to put the friendship maybe at the second, and the person's safety to the top of the list. And they may be wanting to talk about it. They may be having to bottle this up and not feel they have anyone to talk about, and they're just waiting for someone to sort of reach out a hand and just ask that question, "Are you okay?" And I guess that one of the reasons we have that "Are you okay?" day. I know that might be more towards guys, is it?
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong there, Kane, but it maybe should be for everybody, perhaps.
Yeah, and there's different forms of okay, like the "Are you okay?" days around mental health and things like that. But just asking if you're okay and if is everything okay at home. You seem different. You seem you don't seem yourself. Is everything okay? Like it's just that one question which might open something up. But if the person kind of denies it or avoids the conversation, then you don't push it. But certainly, it's always okay, especially in 2020, to ask somebody if they're doing okay. And it's nice when somebody asks if you're okay, even if you are. If you're doing well and someone asks if you're okay, it's just nice that somebody's. I think it's nice that somebody has thought of you or cares about you enough to actually ask something as hard as that.
Yeah, and just like the hairdresser did for your partner there. Obviously felt, to ask the question, which is fantastic. That's what we should be doing. We need to try and, get into this more.
Yeah, and if my partner came home with purple hair or no hair or hair extensions or whatever, I wouldn't care at all. But obviously, it's not. The hairdresser said it's not uncommon. Like it's happened on multiple occasions, and they're just a suburban hairdresser.
It's pretty scary. It happens on multiple occasions.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like an isolated thing. It had happened before, but he had that example of the husband dragging the wife back in later that day, and just basically shouting at the hairdresser.
Yeah,
What?
well, look. I think we discussed a few of the different types of domestic violence. Um, I certainly didn't know there were so many, so I'm now, across that a bit more, and a bit more across the signs to try and, you know, see if it's out there.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. It's not hard to, and we'll put some links in the show notes or on our website, which support this, and we'll pop it inside where we post the podcast of some reference points, which certainly shows people what some of the signs are. And these are government websites, so it's not just some hocus pocus stuff. These are proper government websites on domestic violence. So if you just do the research, find what the signs are, find what the different types of abuse are, and just be vigilant and just listen to people and just listen to your friends. Just take in what's going on, and then if you think something's up, just ask. That's the best thing you can do. And if you're a guy who's doing any of these things, fucking stop it.
Mm.
I should ask how your weekend was. How was it, Maddie?
It wasn't too
What,
bad.
what did you and the wife get up to?
We had a couple of days kid-free midweek. Just went down to a nice little resort with a pool and things like that. Took the bikes down, did a bit of, as we're working together now, I guess it's a bit of goal setting, so it wasn't all fun and games. It was a bit serious as well, but it was just great to have a bit of time away from the kids. Makes you miss them more, I feel. Not everyone will agree with that, but yeah, it was good. A bit of a sleep in here and there, good food, good wine, good drinking. And spent the weekend on a shovel and pick. I'm very sore today.
Well,
what about you, mate?
We had the little fella had an egg challenge on Friday, which he's been allergic to egg. He's eaten baked egg, and then he's now passed, and he can eat cooked egg. So on Saturday we woke up, and the first thing he said, he goes, "Daddy, I would like some scrambled eggs and bacon for breakfast." I said, "Little buddy, you can have whatever you want."
Oh, that is such good news.
Yeah. So
Whole new world.
he's wrapped. So we have to keep that up for a while, and then we can introduce softly boiled eggs and stuff like that, and then he'll get the tick and he'll be all good. But
Great.
yeah,
Love those little milestones.
yeah, they're winners. But that wraps it up for this week
Yeah.
of Daddy Eats Last. Remember to subscribe to Daddy Eats Last on iTunes if you haven't done already. While you're there, please leave a review. Also tell your mates about the podcast, especially if they are guys. Most of all, thanks for listening. I'll be back next week for another episode, or should I say serving, of Daddy Eats Last. No dad jokes tonight. Catch you next week.
Bye bye. Bye bye.